Hello, my name is Edwin Rutsch, and I'm the director of the Empathy Center located here in beautiful Santa Barbara, California. The center's mission is to build the empathy movement and to raise the level of empathy in society through education and community building initiatives.
And my name is Anita Nowak. I teach at McGill University, and I'm the author of Purposeful Empathy, a book that invites readers to turn up the volume of empathy in their lives.
And at the beginning of 2024, Anita and I co-hosted the Empathy Summit, brought to you by the Empathy Center, and more than 40 authors of books about empathy participated.
They shared what their book was about, why they were motivated to write it, and what they hope readers will take away. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you'll buy their book.
So our next speaker is Brian Goldman. And Brian is an ER physician and best-selling author. He's Canada's premier radio medical host and broadcaster. And he's also the author of The Power of Kindness, Why Empathy is Essential in Everyday Life. The floor is yours, Brian. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Anita, for the kind and empathic invitation. I want to tell you a little story to begin my 10 minutes. I wrote the book because of an incident that happened when I was an emergency physician on duty more than 30 years ago. I saw a patient with end-stage MS, multiple sclerosis. She was brought to the emergency department where I was on duty. The family was at their wits' end. The patient, a woman, could no longer speak for herself. The family wanted her to be admitted to hospital. And, I wasn't the kind of person to fail to accede to people's wishes. I referred her to the internal medicine team. It took many hours for her to be seen. And every time I walked by the room, I was asked, when would she get a bed? And I became increasingly defensive. And that defensiveness is really an important clue to incipient lack of empathy. At one point, I snapped at the family for all the questions I'd been asked. I'm probably not the only person to do that. But I was accused eventually of unkindness, not of incompetence, of unkindness. And people know when they're being treated unkindly. And I received a lovely letter to that fact from the husband of the woman. She died several months later, not unexpectedly. And it made me ask myself, am I a kind soul? And I think everybody has to ask that question of themselves at one point or another in their lives. That set me on a very personal journey to learn about empathy and kindness in the brain and in the heart. I had a brain scan by researchers at Laval University, Professor Philip Jackson, who's a noted authority in the neuroscience of empathy. And what I discovered is that my functional MRI indicated that I have a pattern that is common to many health professionals in mid-career, that for one reason or another, maybe the experience gets them down, maybe they have the stress of dealing with their parents who are ailing and dealing with their children who have all manner of issues. But I exhibited a pattern on my functional MRI that showed that I tended to underestimate the pain and suffering of my patients. And there are many possible reasons for that. I'm certainly not alone when it comes to that. But it was a clue that something had happened to me along the way. And that led me on a round-the-world journey to learn about empathy and kindness and to meet some of the kindest people on the planet, learn what it was that made them kind and empathic. Was it nature? Was it nurture? And I found that it was a bit of both, as we just heard. Some people are born with more empathy, some are born with less. I certainly met a mother and a son who had off the charts empathy. But very often, not infrequently, it's circumstances that make us more or less kind. It's often facing adversity that we learn to empathize with others. And in the true spirit of peer counseling, we want to be able to show the way for others who follow us and get inspired by people who precede us. So I wanted to discover the acts of kindness of people around the world, and I wanted to find out what it was that made them kind. And just to give you 2 or 3 examples, I met a man here very close to where I live in Toronto, Canada, a man who was born with profound deafness, who made a point as an entrepreneur and as a businessman of hiring people who have one challenge after another, some physical, some emotional. And by the time he sold his business and became a full-time advocate for those with disabilities, fully 20% of the people in his workforce had one kind of challenge or another. And when I asked him, why he was that way, he said it wasn't the deafness that made him empathize with others. It was being discounted because of his deafness. And he was angry about that. And he wanted to make sure that everybody who had a disability, who has a disability, who wants to work, has an opportunity to work to their capacity. So that was one example. Second example, a marketing guru, a young woman in Sao Paulo, Brazil, who became soulmate to a homeless man. And in the process, she walked by him many days and discovered that he was a writer and that he appreciated her respectful tone. He lived in a tent on an island that separated the two directions of travel on this grand boulevard in Sao Paulo, which is the capital of Brazil. And when she stepped into the tent, she discovered that there were 10,000 books in there. He was a poet, and he shared his poetry with her. She helped him to develop a Facebook page, and he became a local celebrity. And eventually, she helped him be reunited with his family of origin. And when I asked her, or when I delved into her psychology, what was it that made her so empathic? She experienced the divorce of her parents. Her parents argued constantly. It was a very unhappy home, to the point that when her parents finally told her as a 12-year-old that that they were going to split up, her first word to them was "tá bom," which means good. Imagine a 12-year-old in that frame of mind and emotion. I also met a psychologist, Naomi File, whose groundbreaking approach to people with dementia involves seeing things from the point of view of the person with dementia, entering their world, communicating with them, entering their world instead of forcing them to live inside our world, which was really an extraordinary pivot to what we usually do. And it led to a form of treatment approach called validation, which is now used the world over. And it's quite amazing. Why did I write the book? I wrote the book to help unpack the lack of empathy and kindness, not just in me, but was I emblematic of what's going on in healthcare? Good and kind people who in moments of stress act unkind. And there are so many stressors in the emergency department, even more than when I wrote the book, which was published in 2017. Patients with complex illness who come to the emergency department because they don't have family medicine. They don't have a family doctor. They don't have a nurse practitioner. That's worse than ever. COVID and other respiratory epidemics causing a crushing burden in the emergency department. The lack of long-term care beds, meaning that patients are boarded in the emergency department. And, we used to talk about hallway medicine. Now we talk about waiting room medicine and waiting room code blues. As you have heard, we are hardwired to be kind and empathic, but stress takes our higher centers, our better selves offline. And there's a lot of stress in healthcare, and we need to address that stress if we're going to make healthcare the kind place that we want it to be. This is, of course, not just happening in healthcare, it's happening in the world at large. What do I hope you get out of the book? Though we are hardwired to be kind and empathic, increasing stress that means that we can't take being empathic for granted. Empathy is a choice. It's a behavior. Sometimes we need to take care of ourselves. Sometimes we need to take care of our families, and that makes it difficult to take care of patients. But we certainly must address the stresses in healthcare if we want to bring more empathy back to healthcare. Now, I have another minute and a half. And the last thing I want to talk about was something that I didn't talk about in the book. I mentioned that when I was asked what would happen to my patient with MS, I was defensive in my reactions. I didn't like the idea of not being able to snap my fingers and get this woman admitted, seen by the internal medicine team and admitted. That defensiveness is an exhibit, or is evidence of shame. And I'm talking not about, the ordinary societal shame or the guilt that we feel that when we're not our best selves. I'm talking about that toxic shame that Brene Brown talks about in her wonderful books. That feeling that I am unworthy of love and acceptance by my peers, in this case, my fellow emergency physicians and nurses and other healthcare providers. And I believe that many people become physicians out of a deep-rooted feeling of internal shame. They're hoping that if they keep doing good things, carry on good acts, and there's nothing more good and noble than being a healthcare professional and helping others at their greatest hour of need, that would somehow assuage their feelings of shame. It doesn't work. And as a result, I think our healthcare system has more errors in it because we failed to confront those errors. And most important, shame, as Brene Brown said, blocks empathy. And I'm glad to see that increasingly there are experts and researchers who are trying to unpack the level of shame amongst healthcare providers that leads to defensiveness about criticism and making mistakes, and are trying to help understand it and deal with it. Because if we do that, I think we'll be able to dramatically increase the amount of empathy in healthcare. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Brian, for your presentation and for joining us today.